Okay, we're looking at observing details, and we're in observing words or parts of speech. Our purpose in observing parts of speech is to realize the function of every word, the job that every word has within a verse. And again, it's important that we know what a word does. Every word does something. Every word has a purpose. Tonight we want to look at verbs and adverbs. We all know what a verb is. A word that states action or a state of being. Matthew 3:1, in those days came would be a verb, of course. John the Baptist preaching, that also would be a verb. In the wilderness of Judea. So those are very simple. There are linking verbs which do exactly what you would think. They link one word to another. They would link the subject to the noun or pronoun, or perhaps an adjective, that which describes the noun or pronoun. Linking verbs would be words like am, are, was, were, have been, will be. Those are all linking verbs. And they're all through the Bible, of course. If you turn to the book of Genesis, chapter 1, verse 5, we'll just look at the last part of that verse. And the evening and the morning were the first day. Verse 8, you have the evening and morning were the second day. Verse 13, third day. Verse 19, and fourth day, and so on. But here in this verse, Genesis 1:5, and the same would be true of all the others that we just mentioned. And the evening, okay, evening, of course, is a noun, and the morning, another noun. And that's the subject of this verse, is evening and morning. So you have evening and morning. Then you come to that word were. And that, of course, would be the linking verb. It is in the evening, and the evening and the morning were the first day. First day is an adjective and a noun. And then again, if you follow it through Genesis, second day, third day, fourth day, so on. But the verb here, were, would link evening and morning with the adjective and noun first day. It just links them. It brings them together. Genesis 17. Genesis 17. You can look at verse 6. And I will make thee exceeding fruitful. I, of course, is the pronoun referring to God. Will make would be the linking verb. And we see what it does. It links I, God, with thee. So that linking verb brings God and thee together. And you see it throughout verse 6. You see it again in verse 7. See it again in verse 8. And then the last part of verse 8 says, I will be their God. I will be their God. Will be is the linking verb, and it links again the two pronouns I and their. Brings God and man together. And that's the job of a linking verb, to bring pronouns or nouns together. Genesis 31:3. I, referring to God, will be. That's the linking verb. Will be with thee. So again, will be is what links I and thee. It's what brings the two together. In John chapter 1, verse 4. Again, none of these verses would make any sense, and there would be no connection between I and thee, God and man, were it not for those linking verbs, bringing the two together. In John 1, verse 4, in him, pronoun referring to the Word, in him was. In him was. That's the linking verb. It links him to life, and it says in him was life. So the two are linked together now, him and life. And the life was. There's another linking verb. The light of men. So two linking verbs, and they link him to life and life to light. In John chapter 6, verse 63, John 6, verse 63. Notice here, it is the Spirit that quickeneth, the flesh profiteth nothing. And here's what we want to notice. The words that I speak, okay, speak is an action verb. The words that I speak unto you, they being a pronoun referring back to words, referring to the words that he speaks, they are. And again, that's your linking verb. It's going to link the words that he speaks, they are spirit, and they are, another linking verb, life. So the linking verb links the pronoun they, referring to words, his words, to spirit and to life. John chapter 10, verse 7, Jesus said, I am. He says this often. Am being the linking verb, expressing a state of existence. I am the bread of life. So I is linked to bread of life. Jesus is linked to the bread of life, or bread of life linked to Jesus. John 10, verse 11, I, Jesus, am, again, a linking verb expressing a state of existence. the door of the sheep. So here we see I, Jesus, is linked, brought together to the door of the sheep. You see the same thing in verse 14. I am, again, am being the link here, the good shepherd. I am the good shepherd. So the verb am links I to the good shepherd. Again, you remove the verbs here, that there's no link. There's no connection. 1 John 1 verse 4, we read that your joy being the noun, may be, that's the linking verb, full. So the verb links joy and full together. There's also what is known as auxiliary verbs. There's verbs that help another verb. A good example would be John 3, verse 7, ye must be born again. Must helps the verb be. It's just a word that helps another word. And then what we need to pay attention to is, again, you don't have to know, okay, this is an auxiliary verb, this is a transitive verb, an intransitive. You don't need to know that. It wouldn't hurt you, but you don't need to. But you do need to know what these words are. A transitive verb is a word which has a receiver of the action. Okay, a verb is an action or an act. And a transitive verb has a receiver, someone who receives the act. Notice in Matthew 25 and verse 35. So if we see a verb, reading on, is there someone who receives the act? Or is it just an act that standeth by itself? Well, if there's someone that receives the act, that is a transitive verb, a receiver of the action. In Matthew 25, verse 35, little ways down there, it says, I was thirsty, and ye gave. Okay? Ye is the doer of the act. Gave is the act. Ye gave me. Okay? Me is the receiver of the act, which of course is Jesus. Ye gave me meat. He goes on here in verse 35, and ye gave me drink. Again, you have ye is the doer of the act, gave is the act, me is the receiver of the act. I was a stranger, and ye, the doer of the act, took me in. So those are transitive verbs. There's a receiver of the act. Then, of course, there are intransitive verbs. There is no receiver of the action. For example, Matthew 4:17, and Jesus walking. Jesus walking. There's no receiver of that act. It's just an act. Let John 11:35. Jesus wept. That's an intransitive verb. There's no receiver of the action. So when you see a verb, we should immediately determine, is it transitive or intransitive? Is there's someone doing an act? Is there someone receiving? Is there a receiver of the act? Now, this is very important when you get into the doctrine of salvation and you start looking at verses that teach salvation, and you notice, okay, God did this, and there's a receiver of the act, which of course is the saved. Verbs have voice. They have a voice. The voice, and again, this is extremely important doctrinally. The voice indicates whether the subject of the verb acts or is acted upon. And we need to notice that. We need to see that. Is the subject of the verb, does the subject of the verb act, or is the subject of the verb acted upon? That's what voice determines, the voice of a verb. Every verb has a voice. Now, there's active voice. The subject of the sentence is the one who performs or produces the action. The action is accomplished by the subject. Notice in Romans chapter 5. Romans chapter 5, verse 8. We're looking at active voice. The subject performs the act. But God, okay, God's the subject. God's the subject. But God commendeth his love toward us, in that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. Now we want to look at two parts here. But God, okay, he's the subject of the verb. He's the one doing the act. The act is commendeth. But God commendeth. It's not, again, we love him because he first loved us. He is the doer of the act. It's active voice. But God commendeth his love toward us. Skip while we were yet sinners, and then notice Christ, okay, now this phrase, Christ died for us. So you really have two phrases here. God commendeth his love toward us. Christ died for us. So you have two phrases. Christ died for us. Christ is the subject. He's the doer of the act. The act, of course, is dying. So what you have here in Romans 5:8, the action is commendeth and died, and the doer of the acts, or the acts, are accomplished by God and Christ. So in this case, commendeth and died would be transitive verbs. Us is the receiver of the act. Us is the receiver of the act, and that's not a universal us. It's not a universal us. So us is the receiver of the action, and it's active voice. God is performing the act. Now notice in 2 Corinthians chapter 5 and verse 21. 2 Corinthians 5, verse 21. For he, okay, that refers back to God in verse 20. And that's the subject here in verse 21. For he, God, He's the subject of the act. He's the doer of the act. Hath made. Hath made. That's the act. Hath made him, referring to Christ, to be. Christ is the receiver of this act. So this act has a doer, of course, and it has a receiver. God is the doer. Christ is the receiver of this act. Hath made him, Christ, to be for us. Again, transitive verb. There's a receiver of the action, but it's active voice. God is the doer of the action. Notice Ephesians chapter 1. Ephesians 1, very familiar chapter. You have several examples here. But in Ephesians 1, verse 3, about halfway down, who hath blessed us? Who hath blessed us? Just take that little phrase. Who refers back to God and Father. And that is the subject. God and the Father. That's the subject of the verb. In other words, that's the doer of the verb. Hath blessed. That's the action. Now, is there a receiver of the action? Yes, us. Again, not a universal us. God is the doer. We are the receiver. It's active voice. Ephesians 1:4. He, again, the subject of the verb, that's God, hath chosen. Okay, hath chosen is the verb. It's a transitive verb. There's a receiver of the act. The receiver being us. See, it's important that we not only see the act, but who's the beneficiary of the act. Who's the receiver of the act. So it's important that we recognize who's doing the act, who's receiving the act. Ephesians 1:6. He, again, the subject, the doer of the verb, being God, hath made us accepted in the beloved. Hath made, of course, is the verb. Again, is there a receiver of the act? Yes. That's us. We're the receiver of the act. He hath made us accepted. Accepted. Ephesians 1:8. Wherein, referring back to grace, he, okay, that's the subject of the verb, hath abounded. That's the act. Is there a receiver of the act? Yes, us. There's a doer of the act, hath abounded. We are the receiver of the act. So you have active voice. There's passive voice. What that means is the subject is being acted upon by an outside force, by an outside power. In other words, the subject is not the doer of the act, but the subject is the receiver of the action. So again, if we go back to 2 Corinthians chapter 5, in verse 21, 2 Corinthians 5, verse 21. We've looked at the first part of that verse. Look at the second part. That we, okay, well, let's go back to the first part. For he, okay, he's the subject there. God's the subject. This is why it's important to break a verse into segments, break it down. And we see he, okay, God's the subject, he's the doer, hath made him to be sin for us. That we, now we is the subject of this phrase. He is the subject of the first phrase. But we is now the subject. That we might be made. So you see, the subject here is being acted upon. The subject's not acting. We are the subject here. We're not acting. We're being acted upon. We might be made. We might be made. That's something done to us. The righteousness of God in Him. The doctrinal side of that is you do not make yourself righteous. God makes you righteous, and He makes you righteous in Him. So in this case, you see, it is passive voice. The subject is being acted upon. That is, we are being made something. We are being made the righteousness of God. The very righteousness of God. That's the only righteousness that's accepted by God, is His own righteousness. You and I cannot achieve that. We're the subject being acted upon. And that, of course, is in Christ. Ephesians 1:11. Ephesians chapter 1, verse 11. In whom also we, we is a subject here, the subject of the verb, have obtained an inheritance, being, there's another verb, and we're the one acted upon, predestinated. Predestinated. We didn't predestine ourselves. We didn't determine the predestination. We are acted upon. Ephesians 2:8, for by grace are ye. The subject of the verb is ye, saved. Are you saved? Again, we're being acted upon. It's passive voice. Ephesians 2:13. Ephesians 2:13. Ye who were afar off are made nigh. Again, ye, that's the subject of the verb. That's who's being acted upon. It's not a universal ye. Were far off, are made, that's the verb, that's the act upon us, are made nigh by the blood of Christ. Verbs also, not only do they have voice, but they have a mood. And there's several of those as well. There is indicative mood, which basically just expresses a fact, expresses a reality. Again, Romans 5:8. God commendeth His love for us. That's just a statement of fact. Christ died for us. Just a statement of fact. 2 Corinthians 5:21 again, for He hath made Him to be sin for us. Just a statement of fact. It's indicative mood. There's imperative mood. An imperative. John 3:7 again, ye must be born again. And that's passive voice. We don't birth ourselves. You must. That's imperative. There's no alternative. Ye must be born again. There is conditional mood, which of course expresses a condition. in order to receive, a condition has to be met. Notice in John chapter 6, verse 51, it says, if any man eat, okay, that's the verb, of this bread, referring to Christ, he shall, that's another verb, live forever. So what is the condition of live forever? Eat. Has to eat of this bread. You can't live forever spiritually unless you eat, partake of this bread. John 7, verse 17. John 7, verse 17. If any man will do, there's your verb, his will, he shall, there's another verb, shall know of the doctrine. The condition of knowing the doctrine is to do. That's the condition. If any man will do his will, he shall know. So the condition is doing the will of God. John 7:37. If any man thirst, there's a verb, let him come, that's another verb, unto me, and drink. Another verb. Thirst, come, drink. Who drinks? Those who come. Well, who comes? Those who thirst. So you see, it's conditioned. It's conditioned upon thirst. And that, of course, brings in the work of the Holy Spirit. John 10:9. I'm the door, Jesus speaking. By me, if any man enter in the door, he shall. Okay, you have the verb enter. He shall be, that's another verb, saved, and shall go. There's another verb. In and out and find pasture. So, what is the condition of finding this pasture? What is the condition of this being saved? The condition is you have to enter. You have to enter the door, which is Jesus Christ. And then, of course, you follow it through doctrinally. No man can, except the Father draw him. But you see, these things have a condition. Verbs also, of course, have tense. Specifies time of action, past, present, future. Can also specify kind of action. It can be a simple act. It can be a complete act, an ongoing act. And then there are adverbs. A purpose of an adverb is to help a verb or to further describe a verb. Again, it just like nouns and adjectives. It helps paint the picture. It helps draw a mental picture in our mind. A simple adverb will typically answer the questions of how something is done, to what extent is it done. It can answer the question of when, it is done. It can answer the question of where. So from those questions, and again, that's just a simple adverb, can do all of those things. Can answer how an act is done, to what extent is the act done, when is the act done, and where. So from these questions, we see that there are adverbs of manner, degree, time, and place. For example, an adverb describing manner, that answers the question of how. How was the act done? Mark 5, verse 13. The herd, again, this is the man who was demon-possessed. The demons are released from the man. They go into the herd of swine. As a result of that, the herd ran. That's the verb. How did they run? Violently. As a result of the demons in these swine, the herd ran violently down a steep place. That's the manner. It's an adjective that tells us the manner. Acts 27:7, and when we had sailed slowly, that the verb is sailed. How they sailed? Slowly. Slowly. Ephesians 1:5. See then, or 5:15, see that ye walk circumspectly. That tells us how we're to walk. It's not just see that you walk, but see that you walk circumspectly. You know, there's a lot of Christians who seem to believe that, because they'll say, well, it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. I mean, they would read Ephesians 5:15, see that you walk. But it's see that you walk circumspectly. See that you walk circumspectly. It tells us how we're to walk. Adverbs describe degree, which answers the question, to what extent? Psalm 119, verse 87, they had almost consumed me. Almost, consumed is the verb, almost is the adverb. Now it reads completely different if you just say, they had consumed me. That changes everything. That little word, almost, they had almost consumed me. So again, it speaks of to what extent. Matthew 18:31, they were very sorry. It could read, they were sorry. But it is, they were very sorry. It tells us the extent. Romans 5:7, for scarcely, there's the adverb, scarcely, for a righteous man will one die. That is, it's rare. Doesn't mean that it never happens, but it's scarce. It's scarce. Ephesians 5:20, giving thanks always. Always gives us the degree of thanks. Philippians 4:4, rejoice in the Lord always. There are adverbs that describe time. Psalm 68, verse 19, blessed be the Lord, who, again, the Lord is the doer of the act here. We are the recipients of the act. Blessed be the Lord, who daily loadeth us with benefits. It's not just blessed be the Lord who loadeth us with benefits. That would be grammatically correct. But it is daily. Daily describing loadeth. Daily is the adverb. Again, God's the doer of the act. We're the receiver of the act. The act is done to us. Ephesians 5:8. For ye were sometimes, that's the adverb, ye were is the verb, darkness, but now. Now is the adverb. Are ye? Sometimes now. It describes the time. We see also the adverbs can describe place. Luke 15:1, they drew near unto him. They drew. That's the verb. How did they draw? Near. Or where did they draw? Near. Then lastly, there are conjunctive adverbs. They're just used to connect. They're used to connect clauses and phrases. Again, it's of extreme importance that you learn to read the Bible by clauses and phrases. Don't just read a verse, but break it down into clauses and phrases. And what connects these clauses and phrases are conjunctive adverbs. They form the same job basically as a conjunction, except it deals with the verb. These words would be like the word moreover would be a conjunctive adverb, moreover. That's a word you see often in the Scriptures. Moreover. It means in addition. In addition. In addition to. So as soon as you see that word, moreover, you have to go back. Well, what's it in addition to? You have to find out. There's the word nevertheless. Basically meaning in spite of. Again, it's something that takes us back. Something that takes us back. The word then can be a conjunctive adverb. The word therefore can be a conjunctive adverb. The word yet. The word yet. In spite of. These are all words that are tended to be read over, not given much thought. The word also. The word moreover. The word nevertheless. The word then. The word therefore. The word yet. Again, it's of extreme importance that we realize that every word, we've stressed this over and over, every word has its place. In a phrase, in a clause, in a sentence, in a paragraph, every word has its place. And in its place, it performs a function. It has a job to do. And again, we have to have some awareness. What is this word's job? And then we begin to see things very clearly. Don't just skip over a word, ignoring its function, ignoring its job. There's a lot of people who would not be erroneous in their doctrine if they just paid attention to what they read. Just pay attention to words. You can't change the function of a word just at a whim. Every word has a function. You can't just change the function of a word to suit your doctrine. That is handling the Word of God deceitfully. That's what that is. There are a lot of people that do that. Again, a word may have different meaning. A same word may have different meaning, but it basically has the same function. As a part of speech, it has a function throughout. That function pretty much remains the same. Don't change it. Just realize, okay, this is what this word does. This word tells me, look back. Look back. Look back. When you see the word therefore, that's like putting a sign up. Look back. Look back. Look back. So it's not difficult. It does take time. It requires a little work. It's not speed reading. It's not a race. It's not a race to see how much Scripture you can read. It's about how much you can get out of a passage. That's what it's about. And that requires that we pay close attention to the details. Brother Ben, if you'll come and lead us in a verse of song.